Welcome back to In the Den, and a real special guest today, the Colorado Rockies Director of Player Development, Chris Forbes. Glad to have you in town, and I know you said you're settled into Fresno, but we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, always a pleasure to come. You know, that I love the ballpark renovations stuff. I get to see the heat I can deal with. It's been hot about everywhere, so I can handle the heat, and you know, I like seeing the kids, no doubt.
Good. Well, and that's a great place to start, because I know you talk about developing people beyond just developing ball players. What is so important? How do you do that at this stage with so many guys starting their professional careers?
Well, I mean, I think you start, you know, newly drafted guys, which you guys are kind of handful in, well, two, I guess. You know, you kind of start in the mini camp, and you try to create an environment where they understand that the quicker they learn how to take ownership of their careers, you know, that's what it takes. I mean, we empower people here. You try to really kind of keep the mantra of person over player. They all come from somewhere, you know, and it's not linear. Their development is not going to be linear. There's going to be a ton of twists and turns, and you know, I say it a lot. I mean, how do we navigate that gray area? And that's going to be a big part of these transitions that they're going to have. You know, shortstop was a high school kid. He got smoked by a 98-mile-an-hour fastball last night. You know, it probably didn't happen in Stillwater High School, I'm assuming. He didn't face anybody that firm, but so, I mean, I think it's just, and you've got to kind of meet them where they are. I think that's really important too. You know, whether it's introducing them to research and development or the performance lab space, or, you know, what they're doing in the weight room, physical performance wise, or especially like the introduction to mental skill, which is a huge X factor in the pro game. It all takes time, you know, and you have to give it to them in digestible chunks, I think is critical. You know, some guys are going to take on and really quick, and some guys can take a little more time.
Yeah. I like that you said it's not linear, because it's just like human beings, right? Like when we develop, as whether it's professionals or in personal life, it's not a linear thing, right? Like you make mistakes and then you learn from them and you go back. How much of your role now has been influenced? It sounds like some coach speak, but I mean, you coached at the University of Northern Colorado. How much of that coaching background do you pull on for this role now?
I think you do a lot of, you know, the intriguing part of you don't repeat mistakes. You know, that's probably the biggest thing I learned in 11 years of college coaching. And you kind of develop your own, you know, Mount Rushmore of guys that have influenced you, you know. And I was lucky enough to have a guy up in the cave for those years coaching with Falmouth. There was a heavy influence on just how he treated people. Because you can get caught up in the game, you can get reactive to something that happened in that game, or you can truly stay in the process and recognize it, you know, Thursday night, Blasek gave it up, you know, and he was due to give one up. And it's good for his career to have to go through that, you know, and now dig deep, and you look forward to now the next outing, you know, and how is he going to bounce back, because that's going to happen, you know. And I think we all sign up for a game of this much failure, so you know, you kind of take all of it with a grain of salt. But I'm sure there's a ton of coach speak, you know, whether it's, you know, Bingham, who I played with at KU, or, you know, watching a Ted Lasso episode on the plane. You just somewhere in between. You just try to keep, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think part of that too, right, is it's not just the players that you're working with. You are working with coaches, and, you know, I mentioned to you before, it is crazy to think about the map of places that you cover. You might be in Washington State, and then you come down to us, then you go over to Albuquerque, and you got Hartford, and oh yeah, you're based in Denver.
Yeah.
And so you're dealing with these coaches all over the place who are in different time zones, impacted maybe by different cultures in their cities, and you're coaching them as much as you're coaching the players, right?
I think we have to also, because staff development's got to be a big piece of this. You know, if you're and they all have lives, you know, they've all had careers, but you constantly have to evolve in how the game's being played today, or what resonates.
People forget that sometimes.
People do forget that, you know. And I learned, there was a Reggie Christensen's the head coach at Sac State, and he was a volunteer at KU, and I used to work those summer camps, and he had told me he played at Menlo, which he probably knows.
Cool.
And he had told me, I can't remember the coach there, but he had been there a long time, and it's kind of legendary for one of the smaller NAI type programs. But he said, you just never can forget how hard this game was to play. And, you know, and that's ultimately, they're going to punch out. They're going to drop a pop-up like we've seen. They're going to do some things that, you know, miss the cutoff man. It's a game played by humans.
Yeah.
And so keeping the human element in check and trying to surround them in a holistic approach of all these processes that are here to help them. So I never wanted to be a farm director that was going to come in and change the narrative of how the clubhouse space, which is theirs, and we've tried to get them to take ownership of whatever culture you want in this clubhouse is on you guys. It's not for me to stand up in front of the room and this is how you guys should be acting, and this is how you should be, just trying to get these teams to understand that this is family and you're moving up the train, and unfortunately there are going to be days like we've had this week or even last week where we have to give a hug to somebody and say goodbye. But that's all part of it, and you have to have an empathetic ear because they all go through something. I mean, you're talking about the travel. I flew from Boca Chica, Dominican, to Denver to pack up to fly here yesterday. So I landed on Wednesday, packed up the next morning, and and I'm not, I didn't take geography in KU, but I'm fairly certain that's got some miles to it, But I think you have to understand that, they are going to have lives, and it's generationally different. And where I think it's become harder is they're bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, you got a high school kid last Thursday night or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Thursday night, for them, they were facing, it was bumping 96, 98.
Yeah.
And that's a high school kid. There was a high school kid in Colorado, which is not a massive baseball state, that got drafted. He touched 100.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so, it's firmer. The stuff has got so much life to it. They've also got more static in their ears with, the family, the social media components, the access to where they rank in prospects, all that stuff. I mean, I'm not a get off my lawn guy at 53, but there wasn't the internet when I was at KU. I mean, the internet, so I didn't have to deal with all that stuff.
Sure.
And that's why I think that, you really have to kind of walk in their shoes a little bit to what they go through.
So you kind of touched on it, but I was going to say, and I've heard you say before that the biggest jump that a professional baseball player will make is from AAA to the big leagues. But what can these young players do now? And you kind of outlined some of it, but what can they do now to prepare themselves for success when it's just kind of figuring out how to deal with all that stuff?
I think a critical piece is you got to stay present. You got to be where your feet are, and you're in Fresno. It doesn't mean we think any differently of you. When they changed the landscape of minor league baseball, whatever that was a couple of years ago, where they dropped the teams, they knocked it down to 165, I think they recognized that we were able to get stuff that should have happened years ago, which was, paying their rent and paying a living wage and stuff like that. But on the flip side, it became very shorter of a window to, if you're a college guy with a 165 knowing every year there's going to be 21 or 22, 23 new guys coming in, you've got to be showing progress immediately that you're picking up on what we're saying and you're developing, and ultimately it's got to show up, it's got to translate to everything we do every night on the game out or in the batter's box, etc. So, but I think staying present is something that, you don't want to start playing GM or start playing farm director as a guy in low A. Well, how can that guy move and I didn't move? Well, sometimes you don't move because you are the prospect and we needed a body to fill space. And I think they get to know it, they get to learn it. I'm very accessible, so hopefully they'll ask questions, because I want clarity with everybody.
Well, talk about that, and you touched on the 165 thing. I feel like that has been a big topic of conversation, especially just because the deadline just passed. Yeah. But how much has that changed the job over the last couple of years?
It presents a lot of challenges. There's this, it's fine number if nobody gets hurt.
Yeah.
And if I had a year where nobody got hurt, I'd probably play lottery right after that, because I'd probably have a decent chance of winning it. But it's just not enough.
Yeah.
For me. And guys don't get hurt, like you'd want them to. If you're, an outfielder went down, and then this guy went down, no, it's like 3 outfielders went down, or, 2 pitchers went down. It's just constant, trying to shuffle guys around and make sure you're keeping certain guys on a pace, versus trying to challenge a guy too much. That's a big thing. So, it's been hard to kind of navigate that part. And then you end up, sometimes we have to sign a guy out of Mexico or independent ball, and they can onboard them. And then sometimes it ends up being to a point where the number is so tight. Hopefully you've always got some play.
Mm-hmm.
But then, if they send a guy down from the big leagues, we have to release a guy. So you want to have some play in that number. So it just,
it's calculus.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's not my strong suit,
Me neither.
Yeah.
And you talk about that, and I think with all that, you're also trying to factor in winning. And how is this particular team playing together? You talk about pieces of, hey, this guy might not get a chance. He might just have to be up there just in case. But you also have teams who are in the thick of a postseason push that you're trying to balance with.
Which is a huge part. You want them playing in meaningful games in September. That's the goal. And I present it. It's a fine line, with winning and development. And our goals have been as an org to be in the top 10 in baseball and minor league wins. And we emphasize winning here. I mean, that's the job. As a Rockies player, your job is to come in the ballpark every night and put your thumb on the pulse of that game that night and find the win. Because there's a win every night.
Yep.
Thursday night we stole a game. Right? Probably didn't deserve the win that after it kind of switched. But
sure.
That's why you play all 27 outs. And so, you kind of present that. But there's stuff that you'll see, Marcos Herrera, hey, you're going to have to throw your slider on the game out. I know you don't have conviction into it, but you cannot be a big leaguer without this secondary pitch to kind of carry you. A guy that we had that's kind of trending pretty well and very young. I think he was here, might have been here last year, Wellington Herrera, for a while. He's can be 95 to 100 from the left side. And he can get guys out with just a fastball alone, but he's got to throw a slider on the game out. And so when he'll have these nights where he'll give some stuff up, but we have to develop that. And you have to develop that with the adrenaline that a game out and under the lights, not in the lab setting or not in the bullpen. He's got to be able to throw it on the game out.
You brought up Thursday a couple of times, and I think that's a great example of, on the offensive side, there's multiple sacrifice bunts in that situation. There's bunts for hits throughout the year with this team, hit and runs. How much of an opportunity, when you talk about winning and tight end, how much do you see that in the future of baseball where, guys are stealing more bases across the game, but it also seems like teams aren't prepared to field bunts as much. Is that something where these guys can really seize opportunities to develop and find a spot on the big league roster?
Well, especially when you look at a 26-man roster and you have those, one of the teams that intrigues me the most in the big leagues right now is Milwaukee. Knowing their manager when he coached at college and how he kind of created a narrative around he wanted the undersized contact hitters, dirtbags, sliding in spikes high, and that's exactly what he's got in Milwaukee offensively, and that's a sustainable offense where, they're experts at the details, the blocking and tackling. They can, not only do they play a high degree of catch, but they read the down angles, so they get the next 90 feet. And we put it in play probably 4 years ago of a win 90, and we talk about it openly. Where did we win 90 feet? We go through areas in the game. The kids start getting plugged into it. We talk about team plate appearances more than we talk, I don't like the big hairy guys that come up here and try to take shots on goal, because that's not, it's exciting for the fans, but when you're punching out 180 times and you're pushing up 20, that's not,
that
math ain't mathin' for me. And the stolen base thing, we were fourth in all of minor league baseball last year as an organization. And obviously Kristen Norfie is here right now, our outfield base running guy, but we'd like to go. And if they get thrown on, I tell them, next time you're on, go again. That's why you have the minor leagues, right? To kind of pick up the nuances of the game, or where he's tipping something, or where you can get an edge, or where you can gain another 3 inches towards second base, whatever it is. So I think that all goes into the teaching, and going back to the other side of it, the defense part. You see why we do the team fundamentals every day, and they are hopefully done at game speed, even when I'm not here, because
they are. I can promise. Yeah.
Because otherwise we're going to set up a nanny camp, and I'm going to be checking on it, when I'm on the road. But that you have to do that at a clip, and it doesn't need to be. This old JUCO days of 6 hours of first and thirds until we get it right. It's you do them with such frequency that you're touching on them a lot, and then ultimately it just becomes their way of life. So
Well, and I think we see a lot of that bear that out, right? The second half has been phenomenal here in Fresno. The team is executing those things, and it feels instinctual, just like we talked about Thursday night, where teams might be caught off guard. But overall, what are you most pleased by with some of maybe the results that you've seen over the course of the year?
I mean, I think, you looked at a team when we broke camp, you always kind of look, and I'm hard on our system, but you look at it, you're like, oh, I kind of like Hartford. Last year we had a really good dynamic, line-to-line dynamic in Spokane, and they were loaded.
On the championship.
Won a championship. Yeah. And then, this year, I knew we were going to be young here with a lot of our Latin group coming in, but you were hoping you were surrounding them with the right type of college guys, because typically it's the college guys that acclimate faster to the Cal League. And that was not the case. I mean, our first 6-8 weeks here, I was just like, well, I don't know if we're getting any hits during BP. And then, we kept saying, I think they could be a second half team. And you saw some guys in the ACL that you're like, once we went to the playoffs in the ACL, and once we got eliminated out of the playoffs, we were able to get Brito and DeLise up here. That at least it provides such an energy, and then obviously we had the draft and Holiday and Thatch just got up here, to kind of it provides another bit of energy. And once we get some of the other drafted guys going, they'll end up here too. So I think it becomes a spark to the club, but just how they're going about it, not only from the players, but from the staff, and the staff really molding together and having an intimate understanding of what each one's thinking.
Right.
And then, the pitching, because, we've shot some guys up to Spokane that, I'm sure you guys would love to have Everett Catlett here.
I might have brought him up today.
You know what I mean? Like, Allie's done it, and he's turning through because it's his first full season, so you have an innings cap. Yeah. He's flying through them. His season may be over like next week. Right? I mean, he is going through them so fast, because every night it's 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So I mean, having those guys. And then now you get to a point where, obviously Brody Breck back and healthy, and Jackson Cox making his way back. So a lot of guys that we had missed some time with, now kind of getting them out here and starting to show what they can do. That's great. It's been great.
Well, Chris, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for the time, and really appreciate the information. That's Chris Forbes, the Rockies Director of Player Development. We'll be right back with more In the Den right after this.